On the night of July 22nd and 23rd of 2015, 5 members of the Bever family were murdered in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. 2 members of the family, a 2-year-old girl and a 13-year-old girl, survived. The 13-year-old girl later identified her 2 brothers, Robert Bever, 18, and Michael Bever, 16, as the assailants. The brothers were later captured and both charged with 5 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of assault and battery with the intent to kill. At around 11:30 p.m. on July 22nd, police were alerted to 709 Magnolia Court by a 911 phone call made by 12-year-old Daniel Bever, who stated his brother was attacking the family. Screaming, commotion, and a male's voice were heard in the background before the line went dead. Dispatchers tracked the address by searching the number after a failed attempt call to David Bever, the father. They dispatched officers to the scene. When the first responding officers arrived, they saw blood around the porch of the house. They knocked on the door and they heard a faint voice calling for help and forced their way into the house, where they immediately found 13-year-old Crystal Bever bleeding from multiple stab wounds. After pulling her out of the home, the officers discovered Daniel Bever and the rest of the victims, who were all dead. It was believed that one of the brothers responsible for the killings lured out the victims by pretending he was under attack. And he pounded on the door. Daniel Bever had himself locked in his dad's office, and Michael Bever pounded on the door, acting like Robert was going to attack him and kill him. And Daniel opened the door, and they also tricked Christopher Bever into opening the door the same way. Crystal Bever survived the attack but was critically injured from her wounds, and she identified both of her brothers as the attacker. She underwent surgery at a nearby hospital, and she was listed in serious but stable condition. Um, Auden Bever, who was 2 years old at the time, was found alive and unharmed inside the house. The surviving children were put into state custody. The parents, as well as 3 children, were all stabbed to death. Knife, hatchets, and other bladed weapons were found at the scene, along with protective gear. Law enforcement officials claimed at least some of the weapons found were used in the killings. 5 members of the family were killed and 1 person was injured. The medical examiner determined that the cause of death was multiple sharp force injuries. Autopsies revealed the victims died between the late hours of July 22nd and the early hours of July 23rd. The victims were David Bever, 52, the father, killed by at least 28 stab wounds to the torso, face, neck, and left arm and hand. April Bever, 44, the mother, killed by blunt force trauma and at least 48 stab wounds to the head, neck, torso, arms, and hands. Daniel Bever, 12, the son, killed by 9 stab wounds to the back, shoulder, and chest. Christopher Bever, 7, son, killed by 6 stab wounds to the back, chest, shoulder, and lower leg. Victoria Bever, age 5, she was the daughter, killed by 18 wounds to the side of her neck, her chest, back, and upper arm. Crystal Bever, 13, which survived. Her injuries were a slit throat and stab wounds to the stomach and arms. And Auden Bever, who was 2 years old, she was sleeping in another room. Neighbors said that the Bever parents homeschooled their children and kept a close eye on them. They weren't allowed to mingle with the other neighbors or the other children. The family's lifestyle was reported to be that they were very inconspicuous and reclusive, and that some neighbors didn't find out the full name of the entire family for the first time until the medical examiner released the names. Defense attorney stated that David Bever was physically and verbally abusive towards his children, according to the testimony of Crystal Bever. Robert Bever claimed that both his parents were hateful and abusive to him and all his siblings. Robert Bever confessed to committing the murders. He claimed that he and his brother planned the act out for some time and intended to commit a shooting spree outside the family, hoping it would rival and even outdo the 1999 Columbine High School massacre. He later confessed that he and his brother planned to dismember the bodies of the family, place them in storage bins, and hide them in the attic of their home. He also stated that they planned to steal the family car, shoot and kill 5 random people, each at multiple locations, and eventually achieve a body count of at least 50 people. An officer who interviewed Robert Bever stated that Bever admired serial killers and he hoped to strike in locations outside of Oklahoma, and he wanted to achieve a body count up to 100 people or more. On the night of the murders, the two brothers fled the scene through the back door of the house when police arrived and headed into a wooded area behind the property. They were apprehended quickly with the use of a canine unit and arrested without incident. The suspects were 18-year-old Robert Bever, the oldest son of David and April Bever, and his 16-year-old brother, Michael Bever. Robert Bever was armed with a knife at the time of his arrest. One of the brothers spontaneously uttered that plans for the killing were stored on a flash drive inside the home. The flash drive was later retrieved by the police when they searched the home for a second time. They also recovered computer equipment and video surveillance cameras, which they believe recorded the murders as they were located near where 3 of the victims' bodies were found. It was later determined that the brothers planned to make 2 videos, one depicting the bodies of their family that would be shown to investigators and prosecutors, and the other without the bodies so that it could be posted online. The brothers were charged with 5 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of assault and battery with the intent to kill. On June 17, 2016, Robert Bever attempted suicide in his cell by hanging himself with a bedsheet. The detention officers, during a routine security check, saw him. They cut him down. Medical staff checked on him, determining he was uninjured, and he was moved to suicide watch. Robert Bever eventually pleaded guilty to all counts and was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Michael Bever's trial began on April 16, 2018, and on August 9, 2018, Michael Bever was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole. The Bevers family home did burn down, but they did build a memorial park in its place in honor of the Bevers and the first responders.